All right, I think we're approaching critical mass here, so about to get started. Before I turn it over to our lovely Executive Director, Claire Rice, a couple quick housekeeping notes. So you can, of course, use the chat all throughout to say hi. Um, I'll do it right now and say hi. I'm Casey Smith, Senior Director of Programs and Special Projects here at Arts Alliance Illinois. We also have a Q&A function. So if you see that separate Q&A box, while we're going through the presentations today, if you have specific questions, we'll be able to answer them. And Andrew Schneider, who will be introducing here shortly, wants to be sure to know that if we don't get to your question today, we will be collecting those and following up individually with folks. And with that, to kick us off here, I will pass it over to Claire Rice.
Thanks, Casey. Happy New Year, everybody. So wonderful to see all your friendly typing in the chat. Really happy to be in community with all of you and to update you all on the state of policy and advocacy work. We'll touch, predominantly on the federal and state levels today. If you have questions about localities or specific other questions, as Casey said, we will either get to them today during Q&A or follow up with you. And I'm just really, really happy to introduce you to our team. I'm delighted to have our friend and colleague Cynthia Chen here from Creative West, who I'll introduce in a minute, but wanted to welcome our brand new, even, popping into this webinar before his first day. Good, he's on the clock. We're paying him, folks. Don't worry. But he before his official start was willing to do this webinar for us. So delighted to welcome our incoming Senior Director of Government Affairs, Andrew Schneider. He comes to us from the great state of Wyoming. He was the Executive Director of the Wyoming Arts Alliance there. Made some really incredible strides in a not insignificantly challenging political environment there. A little bit about Andrew's bio here on this slide and what the Senior Director of Government Affairs will do. For us, this is a new position at Arts Alliance. We've had our wonderful colleague Jonathan Vanderburg in a government affairs and civic engagement role in the past, but we're really kind of focusing in on the legislative relationships with this new role, which we're very, very excited about. And so I'm very, very happy to welcome Andrew, and also, of course, shout out our colleague Bindu Puri, who has been our Director of Community Organizing. And the two of them will be your primary points of contact when it comes to campaigns, our organizing work, our policy work, our advocacy work, questions you have about what we can and should be doing in Springfield. So very, very, very excited to welcome Andrew and to celebrate the team of Bindu and Andrew, who will be working with and behind all of you to advance our agenda. Andrew, do you just want to say a quick hello?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Claire. I know everyone here is here today to talk about the 2025 Arts Agenda, so I'll just keep it brief. I'm thrilled to be joining the Alliance team and begin serving the amazing creative communities across Illinois. Although my career has taken me all over the country, I did just spend the last 4 years organizing around rural healthcare issues and building new coalition to fight for the arts in my first home of Wyoming. In that time, I was really proud we successfully defended arts and culture workers and volunteers from harmful bills that would have criminalized us for creating, exhibiting, and archiving works. And even though it was a tough political environment, we worked in a bipartisan way, very closely building relationships with elected officials from both major parties. We're able to secure historic appropriations for cultural grants, for creative startups, and to win the first increase for the State Arts Agency there after over a decade of having their budget cut in every budget cycle. So this is kind of what building people power can do for our movements, and I'm really glad to be bringing that work here to Illinois. Also, a couple fun facts. Over the last 2 years, I served with our guest speaker as the co-chair of the Western Arts Advocates Network. Cynthia facilitates that group for Creative West, organizing regionally among the 13 Western states and Pacific jurisdictions. I'm also a member of the Creative States Coalition, organizing on the national level and in DC. And I've focused on many broad issues, but really including rural arts equity and the intersection between the arts and environmental justice and social justice. But the funnest fact of all, I'd say for last, which is that I graduated from the Conservatory of Theater Arts at Webster University in St. Louis almost 20 years ago. And my first ever summer stock theater job was here in Illinois as a stage manager for Timberlake Playhouse in Mount Carroll, Illinois. So coming back to Illinois now in this political moment is a big full circle moment for me. And I cannot begin to wait to begin to travel the state and explore and support the important work that artists and cultural practitioners do in every community, which we'll talk more about that later. So without further ado, let's get into today's agenda. I think, Casey, that's over to you.
Yeah, so we are going to do a quick walkthrough, a couple kind of high-level action items that Claire will go through with us. We're going to give a brief look at our strategic plan for those of you who may be new to the Arts Alliance. And we'll be diving into the state of the arts sector, the legislative priorities for 2025, and then a couple additional things that we have going on in the first 6 months here of 2025. Claire, you want to hit on our key action items before we
Yes, so you'll get a ton of information today from the team, primarily from Andrew, and I just want you to walk away with 2 homework items. You'll probably hear this more than once, just to hammer it home a couple times. So number 1, we've got a survey out there this is mostly for our organizational partners. So if you represent an organization, we want to get a read, especially with the federal funding coming to a close and a lot of the relief funding. We know a lot of folks are kind of hitting that fiscal cliff that we've been worried about for a while with the end of COVID relief. So we're doing a very, very brief sort of financial stability survey. If you can respond to that, that's incredibly helpful for our advocacy efforts. It's short. You'll have a link here. You could do it here today. And it's there it is, a super brief survey right in the chat. So if you can fill that out for us, we would be very, very appreciative. One response per organization, please, there. And then 2, we, as Andrew will touch on, we do have our work cut out for us in preserving, the significant victories we achieved last year, which we'll talk about in a second, in terms of state funding for the Illinois Arts Council. So we're in the middle of a campaign. We need sign-ons for the governor's letter to the governor. The governor's office needs to hear from us that a cut after such a huge increase will not stand. So we need you to sign on to that. We need you to send that out to friends, neighbors, colleagues. We're really trying to cut that off this week. So we need a hard push. The last few days of this campaign, we need to be as large and loud as we can this session in terms of protecting those dollars. So those are your 2 action items: filling out the survey and signing on to the letter to the governor.
Great. So this is a quick look with a lot of text on a slide. Apologies. So this is our Arts Alliance's strategic plan. Some of you may be familiar with this, but I just want to give a high level for those who may be new to the Arts Alliance of kind of where our goals are. And as we're hearing about what the political opportunities are and challenges are at the federal and state level, connecting that to what we're all trying to do collectively. The bread and butter of Arts Alliance, increasing public funding for the arts, having that public funding be in line with the incredible contributions of the creative sector here in this state, and also having that public funding be more accessible and equitably distributed. Second huge goal is having arts education, quality arts education accessible for all K through 12 students in Illinois, in every single school here in Illinois. Our third big goal is moving creative workers from surviving to thriving. So that looks like worker protections, that looks like affordable housing, it looks like healthcare, it looks like all of the things that creative workers need to be able to thrive, to be able to have a complete life, childcare, all of the things that don't necessarily get covered when we think about traditional, project-based funding or other types of arts funding. And the last thing is building public will and increasing advocacy for the arts. So we want to build more champions across the state that are supporting these goals. And we want it to really build public will in our society, that arts are not a luxury, that arts are something that are fundamental, that it's fundamental to our quality of life. And it's something that we should be supporting at all levels of government. So this is a little snapshot of our strategic plan. And our focuses as Arts Alliance. I will pass it over to Claire to introduce Cynthia.
We wanted to touch, as I said, predominantly on federal and state updates on this webinar. So we're going to kick things off with federal updates on the policy landscape that impact arts and culture. And to do that, I'm delighted to introduce my friend and colleague, Cynthia Chen from Creative West, formerly known as WestAF. She's the manager of public policy and advocacy there. Creative West is one of 6 regional arts organizations that operates around the country. We are within the Arts Midwest region, but Creative West has a very significant policy and advocacy shop, which is fairly unique to them. And they do work both to support their states out there in the west part of the country, but also they do some significant federal advocacy tracking and engagement as well. So very, very excited to have Cynthia here. Thank you for joining us. And she's going to take us through some federal updates as we look to the inauguration and the new administration.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Arts Alliance Illinois team. Super glad to be here joining you all today from Palo Alto, California, which is the traditional lands of the Moekme Ohlone tribes. And just a shout out to Midwest Connections. I have never lived in Illinois, but actually was born in Missouri and spent some time there, so across the river. So shout out to that. And I wanted to get us started today with the federal briefing. As Claire mentioned, our organization is regional, but we kind of do the work of state-federal connections, looking at state level work with our partners, which is the context that I know Andrew from when he was at Wyoming Arts Alliance, as well as working in federal national coalitions. So I wanted to do a little bit of a grounding for everyone to kind of get us focused and thinking about moving into 2025. We know that obviously in 2024, major election, lots of transition going on. And I got these 4 mantras from one of our local partners in California, who is a civil rights attorney, activist, and poet from Santa Rosa Bay Area. And she recently brought this up in a local coalition meeting that we had in California. Number 1, all hands on deck. Number 2, community before ego. Number 3, all strategies parallel at all times. Number 4, power, not panic. And I really appreciated this level setting that Bernice gave us at a coalition meeting, because I think it helps us keep in mind some things as we move into a period of transition. And even now with the 119th Congress just starting on January 3rd, there's already looking like a lot of things will be happening and just things that are going on at the federal landscape. So, all right, with that, I'll move us into the next slide. As I mentioned, we're looking at a lot of transitions federally. As we know, we're moving into what is called a Republican trifecta. That means the Republicans are controlling the presidency, the Senate, and the House. In this, I think, will folks get a copy of this presentation later on? Okay, so I've included some links in there if you all are interested in doing some digging later on. So when we're looking at presidential appointments, I've included a tracker there for folks who are keeping tabs on that. So all the different cabinet positions, et cetera, et cetera. And then just a quick rundown, we're looking at slim margins in the Senate, a little bit larger than before, with Republicans holding 53 seats, Democrats and independents who caucus with Democrats holding 47. And then the majority leader will be John Thune from South Dakota, majority whip, John Barrasso from Wyoming, and the chairman of the Senate Republican Conference, Tom Cotton from Arkansas. So looking at the House side, also very small, slim margins there, but majority Republican as well, with Mike Johnson recently being elected as Speaker of the House, Steve Scalise from Louisiana, looking at a lot of folks from the South there in leadership, and Tom Emmer from Minnesota as whip. So some of the other things that we're looking at that matter to arts and culture is the committee assignments. Committee assignments matter because we're looking at how, if we're looking specifically at National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities budget appropriations, that'll happen at committee levels, as well as other federal policy topics happening at the committee level. For what we know now in the 119th Congress, the Senate committees have been defined and assigned, but we're still waiting to hear about House committees. There have been sporadic kind of press releases going out from individual offices saying like certain representatives know their committees already, but for now we don't have a comprehensive list. So we're still waiting on that comprehensive list for House committee assignments. So I took a quick look before this call to see where Illinois is landing. So both senators from Illinois are Democrats. It looks like there will be a representative on the Appropriations Committee, as well as some other interesting committees that might impact arts policy, like commerce, agriculture, if you're looking at rural development. So feel free to take a look at that later on. And we'll move into the next slide. Okay, so something that I wanted to touch on, which is like unavoidable in our field, is the NEA, NEH appropriations. So appropriations with National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities. Currently where we're at with that is at the end of the calendar year last year, Congress decided to push back the appropriations for FY25. So while we are in 2025, we don't have the official budget numbers yet for FY25. That deadline is looking at March 14th. And then simultaneously, we'll be looking at appropriations starting for FY26. So currently where we are with FY25 is the House Appropriations Committee put forth a number of about 203 million for both agencies, and the Senate came in a little bit higher with 209 million. And we're kind of in that waiting game of seeing how the final negotiations are going to pan out. Something that people in DC keep talking a lot about now with the new configuration and the new numbers of the new members of Congress is a procedural thing that might happen called budget reconciliation. I've left a link in there. Basically, TLDR, long story short, reconciliation is something that can happen if there's a majority control of Congress that helps streamline the budget process, meaning like there will be less options for debate and things like that. So it can kind of push through bills. Some things that have happened where this procedural mechanism has been used in the past, most recently, I believe, was in 2017. They used the House and Senate used this procedural mechanism to push through the Trump tax cuts. So that's kind of an example. It can only be used on fiscal policy and like things that have to do with revenue. And so that's something that if you hear that in the news or you hear that things are being pushed through, you can take a look at what that means. All right, so for now, we don't know what's going on with FY26 budget for the cultural agencies, but we're definitely trying to keep a close eye. There's many folks in the field that are keeping a close eye on that. I know that Americans for the Arts has been calling up people to take meetings and flying in folks to do that. We at Creative West are also hosting a federal fly-in in March closely timed to this budget deadline for FY25 and looking towards FY26 federal budget as well. We'll be bringing in advocates from the Western states to meet with their congressmen. Okay, so I wanted to move into the next thing, which is I have been hearing back from folks in the field really worried about the cultural agency appropriations with the new administration. Worried that in 2017 there was this precedent of the Trump administration zeroing out the budgets. I think kind of the flip side of that is we can read it in a way that there was bipartisan support in not defunding the cultural agencies back then. So hoping that we can still, advocates can do the work and like hold on to that as hope that the cultural agencies do have supporters at the federal level and continue to work. We'll see what happens when Trump announces his budget. Usually, I think in February is when the president puts out his budget. All right, so in terms of like trying to stay positive and looking at what is happening federally, I think one of the major goals is looking at harm reduction and reducing excessive impact of political environment on arts and cultural infrastructure. So I think broadly that can mean trying not to get too caught up in things that are that can veer towards cultural rhetoric or potentially drawing too much attention to the cultural agencies. That doesn't mean that we're not going to be up there advocating, or folks shouldn't be up there and paying close attention to what's happening. But I do think we are in an environment where there is potential a target that can be put on the agency's back. That being said, I think for observationally, based off of, I'm going to get into this in the next slide, of priorities of the upcoming administration, I think there might be bigger fish to fry than micro agencies that you might call that have budgets of 200-ish million, but we never know. So staying vigilant and making sure to focus on relationships with those key appropriators is very important. Okay, so I'm going to go into the next slide about trying to predict or see, like I have no crystal ball, but based off of what I'm reading and seeing what's being put out as priorities from the upcoming administration. So on January 3rd, Speaker Johnson was reelected to serve as the Speaker of the House. As part of that, he gave some remarks that outlined pretty clearly what his priorities are as Speaker. We'll see how successful he is in holding the Republican coalition together. As we know, if folks have been reading the federal news, that coalition is becoming more and more fragmented for various reasons. But according to Speaker Johnson, these remarks, these are his top priorities. Number one, he explicitly said secure the border, followed by extending Trump tax cuts, protecting U.S. industries, restoring U.S. energy dominance, eliminating the Green New Deal, cutting the size and scope of government, and investing in defense. And these are pullouts that I took word from his remarks. So the kind of rhetoric and framing of that is these are the words that he used. In this slide, I put bolded and italicized the priorities in which I thought it was really interesting. My read on this is that, commonly at the federal level, the Republican Party has been saying like the whole objective is reducing spending. But according to this list of priorities, there are several items that are top priority that do cost money, whether in the form of direct appropriations or through tax cuts or tariffs, which puts increased consumer costs on taxpayers. So I just thought that was an interesting remark about in decreasing government spending, I guess in certain places, but not all places. So with that kind of context in mind, I think that's kind of how I'm thinking about moving into strategically the next 4 years. Like it's not so much that the new administration's priorities are completely about eliminating all spending. It's looking at spending in particular areas. So how does arts and culture fit into that? We're gonna see moving forward. All right. Okay, next slide. Okay, so given that read, here are some of my thoughts about possible areas of opportunity for arts and culture. So obviously tax policy is one area because the administration is committed to making some kind of major tax reform in the coming year. Is there a way that we can be making sure that whether it's nonprofit tax policy or individual artist tax policy at the federal level is getting kind of into that conversation? That's a potential area of opportunity. In economic and workforce development is also a potential area. We'll see. I'll kind of get into this a little bit later about specific opportunities, but that's a potential area with an administration that's really focused on economic growth. I think a lot of people in the field are really trying to lean into this rhetoric of arts and culture contributing to the economy. And I know that it's not the only thing, and for many people, there's many other reasons, and we know that arts are inherently important to the community, but kind of understanding the political environment that we're moving into the next 4 years, this is probably a direction for argumentation's sake. Another potential area to lean into is rural development, veterans affairs, especially with the new administration's focus on increasing defense spending and building a strong military. That is a potential area. So looking at opportunities within arts and veterans, wellness and welfare, that's a potential place. And then another opportunity that is not necessarily available to every single arts organization, and I know is contested in some communities, is the process of federal earmarks, which is where a specific legislator can get federal dollars back to their specific community. And this, I know, process has been critiqued a lot because of challenges with access. We know a lot of communities don't have close relationships with their legislators, aren't aware of this process, and it's inherently inaccessible in a lot of ways. But a political reality is that typically when there is a when there is a trifecta, the ruling party manages to get more earmarks through. So if there are certain cultural and arts institutions and organizations that are in a position where that is a possibility, it might be possible in the next 4 years that there will be changes to earmark regulations. So in the last Congress, there were actually bans on nonprofit earmarks in certain areas, such as in labor, HSS, and education funding. Nonprofits were ineligible for earmarks, but people are saying that the new chairman for Chairman Cole is interested in kind of relooking at those rules. So again, that takes a lot of kind of insider knowledge, kind of inherently inequitable, but still something to call out. All right, I'm trying to keep us on time. Looking at, I think I'm going to move us into strategies and what I'm hearing from our national coalitions as well as partners. I've linked a few statements from national partners, and really one of the top strategies people are thinking about are trying to align messaging together as a field. This is definitely a challenge because we know that we have a ton of different service organizations, specialty areas, and there's when we talk about the arts, it's a huge field. But one of the national partners that we look at are the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. They've recently put out a statement as well as a messaging guide called Arts and Creativity Strengthen Our Nation that helps reposition arts and culture in this new political context. And that focus is really emphasizing, as I mentioned earlier, the economic benefit of arts and culture, but then also looking at how social benefits can help as well, how that ties into the economic argument. And then finally, really pulling and leaning into state partnerships. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but 40% of NEA and NEH grants go to the states and they get distributed at the state level. So really, as we move into a new political reality where folks are really looking at decreased federal government, uplifting that the cultural agencies work at a local level is something that people should consider leaning into. Another big coalition of national arts organizations is called the Cultural Advocacy Group, and this group is working on putting out a 2025 visioning and transitioning statement strategy for the field. And in that strategy, they'll probably be looking at outlining strategic messaging as well. So more on that soon, hopefully. And I wanted to also, again, just like reiterate the importance of the state, local, and regional work. This is what's so great about having an Arts Alliance at the state level, because the policy decisions that impact arts and culture can happen at many levels. Actually, federal funding for arts and culture is probably the smallest proportion of public funding for arts and culture in most cases. So really making sure that you're shoring up what's happening at the state and local level is going to be extremely important in the next 4 years. And I think that many of the national art service organizations and colleagues agree with that. So shout out to Arts Alliance Illinois and all of the state partners doing the important state and local work. And finally, I think there's just a few tactics that I've listed there, but and then moving into the next 4 years, I think we're going to be moving into a period of high vigilance, making sure we're tracking what's going on at all of the different branches of government, executive and legislative agendas, and making sure we're paying attention there. Okay, so I'm going to move into kind of just wanted to pull a few highlights on specific issues federally. I know in November of last year at the 118th Congress, so that Congress is closed, those bills have died, but we're going to be moving into new bills. But there was increased scrutiny on potentially this nonprofit status bill. I don't know if some folks in this group have probably seen some emails going around about it. It was a bill that proposed kind of a toxic bill, and that it paired two opposing non-related issues. One area of the bill, Section 4, wanted to give power to the U.S. Treasury to deem nonprofits as terrorist organizations based off of their activity, which people felt was a major overreach. And then another portion of the bill wanted to make sure that folks, U.S. prisoners of war, were being able to defer their taxes. And so that toxic pairing kind of made it so if you were voting against the bill, it looked like you were voting against U.S. prisoners of war. But if you were voting for the bill, you were voting, it would appear that you were voting for revoking or like voting against nonprofits. I'm glad to say that the bill died. It came up in the House, but not in the Senate. But that's something that in the 119th Congress, I think folks are going to be continuing to look at generally this theme of increased scrutiny on nonprofit status. So staying high alert on that issue area. Another upcoming issue area for the arts folks, for the arts and culture community, is the new appointment of, and we'll see about, well, likely confirmation of Linda McMahon as the Secretary of Education. I know a lot of folks have been worried about potential dismantling of the Department of Education. Again, no crystal ball, but I think it's unlikely that there's going to be a dismantling of the Department of Education because of the amount of work that it would take in terms of administering all of the financial aid for like college and university across the United States. But a few pullouts and highlights of what Linda McMahon values. She is an outspoken advocate for expanding Pell Grants and alternative pathways and apprenticeships for tertiary learning. So potential opportunity there for folks who are interested in creative workforce development, creative apprenticeships. She's also she's also a supporter of parents' right to choose and back school choice and vouchers. So that's kind of gives you a read of that situation. And then finally, looking at labor and workforce development opportunities. Something that was on the table in the last Congress was something called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. The reauthorization did not pass in the 118th and is still in play and is getting punted into this next session. And basically what that bill is a $3.6 billion investment in workforce development programs across several agencies. And then I was trying to do some research about whether or not the Trump administration has an explicit position. From what I can tell, no explicit position yet, but some analysis is that it could still be at risk because it's seen as non-discretionary spending. So basically like non-military spending. Basically, we're moving into a political environment where anything that's non-military spending could be at risk, but we'll see how things go. So so there's that. Okay, all right. I'm gonna pause and see if I think that's it for me. Yeah.
We've got some questions in here in the Q&A. Thank you so much, Cynthia. That was awesome. For everyone, we will be sending out these slides, so you'll be able to click on all these lovely links that are in this presentation. And for Andrew and Claire, if you also have things to add to any of these questions that are coming up, feel free to jump in. First question, Cynthia, is do we think that that culturally specific organizations or work will be targeted for cuts?
So from what I've been hearing, how am I going to frame this? Yes, like more or less like we're hearing that the Trump administration is looking at cutting and slashing everything that has DEI attached to it. So, I mean, there might be alternative ways to frame your organization's work without, I know it's like, it's a reality that like is kind of crazy to think about that we're moving into this space. But yeah, this is, yeah. Sorry, I don't know if that's helpful, but.
Yeah. What are the strategies for working with the House and Senate Democrat caucuses?
So I think currently, I'll just speak from what we're doing at Creative West to get ready for our upcoming fly-in. We're identifying, we're waiting on that House list for committee assignments for sure. We already know that there are specific folks who are in like making sure that you know whether or not your representative is on a relevant committee. If we're looking at the cultural appropriations, it's going to be the appropriations committee. And then if it's on a different issue area, you'd have to kind of look at what bill or what committee that's interested in. What we're doing at Creative West is we've worked in the last few years to outline particular issue areas in addition to the cultural agencies and appropriations. Looking at rural development, which happens a lot in the agricultural committees, looking at workforce, small business development, which happens in commerce. So I don't know if that answers the question, but looking at committee assignments and reaching out to find out what if that legislator has a specific position on arts and culture as related to that issue area.
Great. There's a question here around receiving support when arts orgs have delays in receiving funding from I'm assuming either DCASE or IAC, these funding agencies, state and local funding agencies. I want to say, feel free to come to our help desk. So if you go to artsalliance.org/support or go to our website, and then in the top right-hand corner, there's a link for help desk. We would love to hear from you and understand when those delays are happening and help communicate with the relevant agencies the impact of those sorts of funding delays. We know it can be really, really tough when you're not receiving the funds when you expect. Another question, how is the field building coalitions and partnerships with organizations and underserved and disinvested communities? I'm going to also say, Bindu, if you want to hop in on this one. I think this is kind of a question where we could also speak a little bit. Some of this will come up in the latter part of this presentation where we talk more about Arts Alliance's state and local work, but if anyone wants to kind of speak on this right now.
We're talking about building coalitions and partnerships
with organizations and underserved and disinvested communities.
Yeah, we're hoping to do a lot of that at Arts Alliance this year, especially with Andrew coming in. We're going to be doing some traveling throughout Illinois in the coming months that we'll say a tiny bit more about later in the presentation. But there's been a ton of work through a bunch of different coalitions at the state level. So The Independent Venues Association has a really strong presence, for example, in the state. We're bringing together various stakeholders from different parts of the arts education field in order to build stronger coalitions, both on the educator side and also in the higher ed space. Yeah, Andrew, did you want to say anything specifically about how maybe you're planning to approach this year?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of Illinois here. A lot of it is really about relationship building and not further putting burdens on disinvested communities to pick up that work. So where we can identify needs, we can articulate those needs, and we can work with your local, state level and federal elected representatives to understand how public funding for the arts is and isn't reaching different communities and get that out there. I think a lot of coalitions are building around access to the arts, because access for everybody is really what is crucial. And that's where we find a lot of bipartisan support. So thinking about moving away from some of the really powerful language that's gotten us to this moment and leaning back into more generic language as these coalitions form, to ensure that every community has access and that we're aware and tracking where that access, where those gaps exist. That's probably all I'll say on that for now, but if that's a special interest for you, and everyone, all 200 of you on this call today, my inbox is open to you. So, reach out and let's have these conversations about what we can be doing to meet the needs of specific real communities here in Illinois.
Yeah, there's also a lot of, sorry.
Go ahead, go for it, Benny, go.
There's also been a lot of strengthening of union building over the last few years in the Chicago region and also throughout the state. So that's something that we're trying to keep an eye on. At Arts Alliance, we're also really invested in workforce development work. And that involves connecting the cultural sector with other sectors so that we can get rid of some of the silos that kind of prevent us from being able to build relationships with other folks that can provide us support so that we're not just relying on ourselves. That said, building relationships across the state is not easy to do. And it's something that we've definitely known for a while. And it's something that we're really excited to put some more resources into this year. It's not easy to build relationships in this field because of how many silos there are, because of how specific everyone's work is, and because of how different legislation, for example, impacts, performing arts organizations differently. Then it might impact visual artists, then it might impact tech workers in the arts world. And so there are a lot of things working against us in that sense. And yeah, just echoing what Andrew said, just building relationships and knowing that we exist, finding out who the other people are in our region, other people are in other parts of the sector that we might not regularly interact with. I think that's the beginnings of relationships that will actually come in handy for us come spring session each year. So we're excited to talk about this with you all more. And yeah, my inbox is also open for more strategizing around that.
Yeah, there was a question here that got some additional chats, which is around corporate partners and how corporate partners can be helpful at this time. Claire or Cynthia, do y'all want to say anything about that?
Yeah, Cynthia, feel free to chime in. I just, we need corporate partners to stand with the Alliance in terms of our campaigns, our advocacy efforts, participate in those, join in them, support them, amplify them. And then we really need corporate partners to continue investing directly in the field and all the arts and cultural organizations that are, vibrant members of their communities and well worth their corporate social responsibility dollars. So we're certainly thinking at the Arts Alliance also about how to more deeply engage the corporate community, kind of bring them back to this work in some ways, and make the case in an advocacy, from an advocacy standpoint, how arts, culture, and creativity can address many of their existing priorities, even if they haven't made that connection themselves.
I'll just
and
add,
yeah, go ahead,
sorry,
Cynthia.
I wanted to add to what Claire was saying. I was going to type this out. I think in the next little bit, like as we're already seeing play out in news, like corporations are having a large influence on what's happening in the political area. So just kind of staying, I don't know, everyone's like particular organization's gonna have a different positioning on how they're doing government affairs, but like just staying like aware, does your corporation have a government affairs branch? Like what is their positioning on certain issues? Like, and how can you help nudge that to support arts and cultural sector?
Great. We're going to do one more question, then head into the state level portion of this presentation. We mentioned statewide coalition building. Are there any recommended strategies or strategies that are currently underway that are regional for arts and humanities efforts?
So I'll take this one. Arts Midwest, which is our equivalent of Cynthia's organization, Creative West, does gather both the state arts agency directors and the creative sector advocacy organizations across the Midwest region. So Gabe, there is infrastructure there and convening happening there that has not necessarily risen to the level of, particular collective action on the part of Arts Midwest. They don't have a policy and advocacy department that's akin to what, Cynthia is doing in the western part of the country, but there is some, initial organizing and convening happening. So we can leverage that in ways that are appropriate and maybe try and push that a little further.
Great. All right. Then I'm going to turn it over to you, Claire, to kick us off with the state level update.
Yeah, so want to be mindful of time, so we'll be very, very brief, just reminders of our successes, our collective successes, not necessarily Arts Alliance successes, but our field successes from the last session. Very, very proud of the work we all did together and really thanks to the governor, I think, primarily for his leadership in this space. But the Illinois Arts Council received a 75% increase in grant making. This is a historic increase for the agency. This is probably the largest ever one-year jump in the agency's budget. So really, really, really important that we protect that. Huge win from last year. We also passed the Creative Economy Task Force bill. That was Arts Alliance leading there in coalition with a lot of other service organizations, intermediaries, and many of you. That was essentially to encourage the state to create a creative sector strategy. It passed the legislature, but it did not have any appropriation attached to it. And we're about to head into a really tough budget year. So we are working with the governor's office directly on how we can operationalize that, given this financial challenge. So there'll be more to come on that. We're not sure that going back for a legislative appropriation will be the path. There might be some other strategies that we might be able to deploy to implement and operationalize the Creative Economy Task Force bill. So more to come there. Very pleased to support our partners at the National Independent Venue Association and on sort of essentially killing some bad bills around ticketing. Andrew will touch on that and how we're gonna, hopefully try and encourage better bills that protect consumers and artists and venues. Lots of work done with the Musicians Union and through our colleagues at the League of Chicago Theaters to increase tax credits, last session, still working through kind of the implementation of those things, and Andrew will touch on that as well. And then there were some protective AI bills passed last year, but we're going to need to keep our eyes on the AI prize for sure moving forward as well. So that's just a quick recap of last session, and then turning it over to Andrew to talk about what we're going to be working on moving forward.
Great, thanks, Claire. And congrats on all the big wins last year. It would be nice if we could all just kick up our feet and rest on our laurels. But we're going to have to work just as hard to show that these investments matter and that they're important enough to preserve in next year's budget. And I say that because we're looking at some very scary projections from the Illinois Budget Office at the state level. I'm talking about $30 billion with a B, $30 billion deficit is what's projected from the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. So with that in mind, here at the Alliance, our number one priority is to protect the gains that the Illinois Arts Council received last year. Although it's not as sexy as fighting for an increase in the kind of wins that we had last session, sustaining these efforts is going to be way sexier than a cut. We know from listening to you all that volatility in funding is a major issue and that there is uncertainty in this fiscal cliff. That's why we're having the temperature check survey. And we encourage arts organizations to fill that out. We also have on the survey page, you can find a link if you're an individual artist, not affiliated with an organization or an entity. Invite you to check in with us there as well and let us know how things are going with on your temperature check. As Claire said, we need to truly get loud this year, and it's why I'm here and joining the team and putting some more gas in this tank is to try to get a huge groundswell of you and everyone you know signing on to this campaign letter to get the governor that we have open right now. That letter is going to close on Wednesday of this week. So if you have already signed the campaign letter to the governor, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm going to ask that you just take a moment right now to personally share that link with 3 arts and community leaders in your circle. Maybe they're a business leader, a corporate leader, maybe they're a county official, city official, maybe they're an arts board member. Think of those 3 people that are close to you that you can trust. Because by bringing your circle into this movement, we can show power to decision makers. Text messages, because of the deadline on Wednesday, are going to be your best bet because we're working quick to deliver this letter to the governor. And if you have not signed the letter yet, that's okay. I'll wait. We'll just hang out here and in awkward silence. No, but joking aside, we do need your support right now. It is very easy to do, and you can have it done by the end of this meeting. If you click on the link in the chat and fill out the sign-on letter through the online form while we're talking. And with that, I'll move on to another exciting update. I think we're announcing this for the first time here today, that the formation of the Illinois Creative Caucus. While grassroots organizing at the community level will continue to drive our strategy and contribute to our wins in the coming year, we simply cannot neglect the important work of organizing at that grass top level. And by that, I mean organizing among our elected officials. Although the Congressional Arts Caucus has been around for many years in DC, and some states have used that model of a congressional caucus in their own legislatures, we've never had a creative caucus here in Illinois. By comparison, I'll use Utah as an example. They're a state with a markedly different political composition than Illinois, and they have had every single member of their state legislature as a member of their creative caucus. So it really gets you thinking about what could be possible here in a state like Illinois. we know that with everything facing our creative communities right now, that this is the time to take these first historic steps towards establishing a creative caucus, which will be a caucus among Illinois lawmakers who support our work. And the reason we're doing this is so that they are better educated and better equipped to fight on our behalf when they're working amongst their colleagues in the legislature. So this is going to be a big lift for our team as we begin engaging all 177 Illinois lawmakers in the General Assembly and begin to facilitate the work of this caucus, the various meetings and information that will be shared. And we could use your help here too. You're going to hear more from us in the coming days and weeks about this process, but just while you're thinking about it, please feel free to reach out to me directly by email, and that is schneider@artsalliance.org. Specifically, if you have a relationship with your state representative or your state senator, or any insights about their relationship to the arts, how they're voting on arts issues, how they're voting on funding, and if you'd be willing to visit with me, just let me know in my inbox. I'll follow up as quick as I can once I'm on the job here in a week, to start really mapping who our first approaches are going to be to build this caucus. And our hope in this effort is that by this time next year, we will be reporting back to you that we have protected public funding at the state level for the arts, and sharing our thanks with you, our Alliance network, as well as this new legislative caucus. Excited to get started. Now I'm going to kind of move into just some other more topical updates. The first one here on this slide is our friends at NEVA, and I want to say hi to Katie. I think that you're here with us, Katie, from the National Independent Venue Association. Anyways, NEVA has been leading on supporting or actively trying to kill various ticketing bills that are moving through the legislature. And so in general, the Arts Alliance, we're trying to support performers and venues and close loopholes for brokers around these practices of speculative ticketing and other practices that are harmful to consumers, but also harmful to the artists and ultimately harmful to the venues that present our artists. I'm not even on the job, but I already know how much we cherish our relationship with NEVA. And we're really looking to support NEVA in advocating for a new bill this session that does exactly that in terms of consumer and artist protection. So we will be letting you know how to take action on this as soon as we have a bill introduced. And Katie, if you're on and assuming this is something you can do, please feel free to drop any other details or updates in the chat there. And I'll move on to the next slide. As a bit of a refresh here, and I know Claire touched on this in her update, but we had a huge win in the K through 12 arts education scene in 2020, way back in the before times. Illinois was the only state in the country that passed a separate and distinct arts indicator that's within the Illinois Plan for K-12 Education Accountability. However, that indicator was weighted at 0, pending evaluation of the data which schools collect from that indicator. Now, COVID hit and all of the ESSA accountability implementation was put on hold, which is why you haven't been hearing about this quite as much in the last couple of years. So this year is really the first year that the state plans to comprehensively evaluate schools using their ESSA plan. And we need to advocate, and we need your help advocating so that the arts indicator will have real weight and some numbers assigned to it. So if you go to the Illinois report card, you can see that at illinoisreportcard.com. Where we're at right now is we're just starting to have information about arts engagement for schools reported in. And so as we begin to look at that data, we, along with our key education stakeholders, the coalition of arts educators in different disciplines who help make this happen, we are already work to meet with the Illinois State Board of Education and determine what the process could be for letting the arts indicator have weight. So stay tuned for that. looking forward to bringing the education work along this year as well. Next piece, tax credits. Two things are certain: death and taxes. Here in Illinois, we have three really great kinds of tax credits. Our colleagues at the League of Chicago Theaters and Broadway in Chicago successfully advocated for $2 million worth of tax credit for nonprofit theaters across the state. This credit will be implemented by the Illinois Film Office within the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. It's important to know that tax credits are, of course, very complex mechanisms. And so accessing these dollars will likely be challenging for smaller and mid-sized organizations. This is something we've been thinking a lot about as advocates in terms of how this is all going to work for organizations so that they can actually benefit from these credits. Also important to know that the state has not rolled out rules yet for the tax credit for nonprofit theaters. And so we know that the Film Office is committed to attempting to make this process as accessible as possible. We'll be working with them on that, and while staying true to those statutory requirements, it's going to be really tough for them to do. So we should know more later this month on the shape of things coming together on the theater tax credits. There is also a music tax credit. This is championed by our friends at the American Federation of Musicians. This credit provides $2 million in tax credits to qualifying music companies in the state that record soundtracks and employ local musicians. Again, here, we do not yet have the implementation details on who will be administering this credit, but I can guarantee you we're hard at work compiling that information, and we'll be getting it vetted and fact-checked and out to you all as soon as we can. Third credit is our film credit. The film tax credit continues to benefit productions across Illinois and be really strong for our communities and our economy. And for those of you who are looking for more information on these tax credits, our help desk will be available to help you navigate these new programs. And again, just give us a little bit of time. As soon as we have the guidelines and implementation details, we'll be rolling all those out. Last update on a Monday afternoon from me here is that we are monitoring, as we always do, bills related to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other bills which may be harmful or occasionally helpful to the creative sector as they move through the legislature. So this session specifically, we called out AI because there will continue to be a number of AI bills that move through the legislature this session, and they could have an impact, good, bad, or otherwise. So we'll be tracking these, and we will update the field as needed as actions are there. And my last call to action, if you would please make sure to fill out the sign-on letter. It's a very quick form. It's going to the governor's desk as soon as we close that at the end of day Wednesday. So it's very important that we get that done quickly here. And then just in terms of bill monitoring, if there are issues, if there's a bill introduced, if there's something you become aware of or concerned about, could be federal, state, local level, please feel free to reach out. You can reach out to me directly, or you can reach out if you already have a contact here at the Alliance that you're friendly with and like working with. There's no wrong door in trying to get us the information about policy issues that are going to affect you and going to affect the field. We want to hear about it. So with that, I will stove up, and I think we have just Q&A left before we sign off today.
Yeah, we've got a couple more updates after this, but want to leave a little bit of time for any additional questions that have come up. One question in the chat: is eliminating ticket handling fees part of your work with NEVA? I think this might be a Clara Bindu question, as Andrew, you are not actually technically on staff yet, even though you are so kind to be here with us.
I mean, fees, and I don't know, Katie, please, again, if you're on, please feel free to respond in the chat. I think these bills up to this point have been about transparency. It hasn't necessarily been about eliminating fees, but being more clear about, you know, what the tickets cost, what the fees are, and helping people understand what they're paying for. And then I think a lot of the bills have been focused on like this issue of speculative ticketing, so buying tickets before they're actually available, and trying to reduce that or eliminate it entirely, is what sort of where we and the NEVA folks I think are interested in. So so I don't think it's about eliminating fees, rather more on the transparency side.
Also importantly, it's about ultimately bringing the power back into the hands of the actual venues that are hosting these events, so that the SeatGeeks and the Ticketmasters of the world are not, through speculative ticketing, through you know, really sneaky things like SEO optimization and stuff, are not usurping that opportunity when the average consumer gets online to try and buy a ticket to the local theater show or the local music show. Very often they find themselves on one of these massive corporation websites, and that's where all of those exploitative ticketing charges end up living. It's an incredibly complicated and difficult to change set of regulations that are really difficult to understand as well, both at the federal and state level, which makes it really slow going work. On top of that, at the federal level, recently, you know, we've had some updates that have essentially meant a setback to the way precedent is set at a federal level with any of these ticketing related bills. And it means that our work at the state level is that much more crucial and important. And it makes us all the more grateful that, you know, folks like Katie and the Independent Venue Association here in Illinois is strong and, you know, really working on this. But the idea is that if the venues themselves are able to sell these tickets instead of these other companies, then all the price of everything comes down, and the majority of that money actually goes into the pockets of the artists that are playing at those venues and the venues themselves. So if you want to be more in touch with the work that NEVA and Arts Alliance is doing around that, please do hit us up. I'll drop my email in the chat box.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on a couple things that are also related to the last couple questions in the Q&A. If you think of additional questions, feel free to drop them in there, even if we don't get to them today. But I want to highlight a couple other things that Arts Alliance is doing that is related to this work, though not direct legislative advocacy. So we have our Public Funding Navigator program. We mentioned that a couple times, which is our Arts Alliance help desk. If you go to our website, we are helping artists, arts organizations, and creative businesses navigate public funding. We're also working on doing a lot of research around where there may be pots of public funding that artists or arts organizations may not be tapping into, or maybe have some advocacy component to be able to lower barriers that currently exist to artists and arts organizations and creative businesses. So on framing, one folk in the Q&A, framing individual artists and small nonprofits as small business owners. Individual artists should absolutely be thinking of themselves as small businesses. And that is something that if you are curious about what sorts of small business resources there may be available, come to our help desk, submit a ticket. The lovely Megan Lewis, who's our public funding navigator, will be able to work with you and direct you to some resources depending on where you're at in the state. The other piece of work that's being led by Sasha Ongtenko on our team is work around creative workers and workforce development. This is a relatively new body of work for Arts Alliance if you've been around and hanging out with us for a while. One thing that will be happening in the early part of 2025 is we're going to be hosting some roundtables around job quality and some other workforce challenges that both the creative workers may be facing, but also arts organizations may be facing. If you are interested in this work, if you have thoughts, if you have challenges, if you have navigated the workforce industry and have some thoughts of your own to share, We would love to hear from you. We're going to drop a number of emails into the chat for folks to reach out, but also if you ever just reach out to info@Arts Alliance, we'll be able to route you to the right staff member here. The last piece that I want to highlight is we are working with the Bureau of Economic Development at Cook County. And if you are in suburban Cook County, or you know folks in suburban Cook County who have networks in suburban Cook County, we're going to be working over the next year to develop recommendations for strengthening the ecosystem in suburban Cook County, strengthening arts organizations, individual artists, and creative workers. We would love your help hosting some events in suburban Cook County, or getting some surveys out to folks in suburban Cook County. So please hit us up if you're interested in that work or interested in getting involved in that work. Last, I'm going to pass it over to the lovely Bindu Peruri to talk a little bit about how to engage with us beyond these things and take us home. Bindu.
So excited to take us home. Also, the lighting has changed so much just in the last hour and a half. So that's how you know the day's coming to a close. Hi again. We're so excited to have Andrew on our team starting next week. And that means we just have more capacity than we've had in a little while to actively engage with the sector just on a one-to-one basis. And build stronger relationships across, like I mentioned earlier, all of these silos across the creative sector that keep us separated from each other. As we come together and build stronger relationships, understand what the levers of power are that affect us collectively, we can push them together. And the more of us there are to push them together, the more legislators will be pushed. And we're really excited to do that work this year and moving forward. Andrew and I are going to be hosting basically beginning of the year, sort of come and hang out and chat with us moments. This is going to be for members only. Sorry to do it, but
exclusive
for members. We're also not sorry to do it. It's actually pay what you can membership. So literally it can be $1 a year. The point is that we want to actually organize the sector. Right. And the point of membership is establishing these clear and formal channels of communication that allow for us to be accountable to one another and allow for us to actually become leaders within the sector to make these changes. And that's why we keep harping on about becoming Arts Alliance members, because we want to grow our strength and our power in a way that we can show each other and show to people in power as well. So one of the carrots we're dangling in February is sort of a come and get to know us set of virtual meetings. One of them is going to be on February 4th, and then the other one's going to be on February 12th. You'll see the details on the screen here. And Nora just shared the registration link in the chat. Once again, you'll need to be an Arts Alliance member in order to be able to join us for these. And it's really, really easy to sign up. And it means that we'll have, better established lines of communication with you throughout this year and moving forward. So we hope that you come and join us. And for those of you who are already members, we hope to see you there. Registration for these two is going to be fairly limited. We want it to be a small room just so we can have substantive conversations, but we're going to be having more of these moving forward. The other thing that I'd mentioned a little bit earlier is that we're hoping to do a lot more traveling this year. Andrew and I are based in Chicago, as is a lot of our staff, and we know that that makes it hard for us to develop the kinds of relationships that we want to have with folks in the sector in other parts of the state. And many of us have traveled to different parts of the state, for specific events and stuff. But one thing that we really want to press the gas on is traveling to different parts of the state just to build these relationships that we're talking about. We'll be coming out with a little more information about that as our own travel schedules get confirmed over the next couple of months, but we'll be doing that through the year. We're also going to be doing some joint road trip style events with Illinois Arts Council and Illinois Humanities. I know Gabe from Illinois Humanities is in the chat. Hi, Gabe. So we're going to be doing a few of those events also this year, so you can look out for that. We'll make sure to include that in our newsletter, another thing that you'll get access to as a member. So there are going to be a lot of opportunities for you to come and see us, and for us to come and see you. If you are a leader in the arts and culture sector, if you are a practicing artist, if you are a cultural worker of any kind, and you want to host Arts Alliance in your town, have us over so that we can have some of these advocacy policy conversations with you and figure out how to create relationships that feel substantive and feel powerful and work for you. Hit us up. I'll drop my email, like I said, in the chat. Come and say hello to me as the Director of Community Organizing. Especially with Andrew on board, it means that the vast majority of my work is literally speaking with you all and building those relationships and making sure that you all stay connected to the collective work that we do, and that you all are actually involved in it. So we want to make sure that we do that as successfully as possible. Can't wait to hear from y'all. And finally, we are doing Capital Day again this year. Some of you were part of it over the last few years. And we're going to be making this a yearly occurrence moving forward. It was so much fun last year and felt really powerful for the advocates who joined us. It's how we got those wins that Claire mentioned earlier. For those of you who might not know, Capital Day is basically a yearly occasion for arts and culture sector workers and leaders of all kinds to come together to Springfield to get to know each other, specifically in this capacity of arts advocates, to get a little bit of training under our belt in terms of how to become better advocates for the arts, and also to meet with and strengthen and build relationships with our legislators. Turns out one of the most powerful ways you can affect change in state legislature is through having a direct relationship with your state legislator. And that feels really intimidating until it happens. And then you realize that they're just a person and they happen to be sitting in Springfield instead of in your district, except for the times that they are in your district, I guess. But the point is that we'll all be coming to Springfield together in order to make a collective statement about the power of the arts, in order to defend the IAC budget, like we mentioned this year, and in order to move forward the work of the Creative Caucus that we're going to be establishing this year. So lots of really exciting things are going to be happening at Capital Day this year in Springfield. We hope you'll be able to come and join us. Hotel rooms book up real quick in Springfield during spring legislative session. So we highly recommend that you check your calendars, see if you're free, and start making plans. We'll be sending more information out about that also in the coming weeks. Yeah, we're just starting to spread the word about it now. So hopefully we'll see you there. And again, if you've got any questions at all about Capital Day, please feel free to reach out to me. Great. I think we've got one.
I see Doug in the chat asked when Capital Day. So it's going to be April 30th, and there will be more information. This is a little like early save the date, and we'll be sending out more information and the hotel block and all of that stuff soon.
Yeah, we're going to have a hotel block for folks who are joining us as advocates. So we'll have lots more details coming out real soon, but go ahead and save the date, and we hope to see you there. Okay.
We're gonna hit on these action items one more time.
Yeah, not to beat a dead horse, but in case it's not abundantly clear, these are very, very important for us to get done, especially this week. The letter and the IAC budget, I'm speaking to the choir here, so I won't go on, but many of you know, because many of you are direct recipients of IAC grants, a ton of the budget increase that we fought for and won last year goes directly into the hands of artists throughout Illinois. And IAC is one of the major and very often only places that artists in central and southern Illinois, in more rural communities, can get access to direct funding in order to be able to sustain their life-giving cultural work. And very often IAC grant recipients are kind of the stalwarts of their communities. They are the folks that are kind of single-handedly holding up the creative infrastructure of their communities. And so getting money and support into the hands of those artists is crucial to keeping the arts sector alive in Illinois. And Illinois Arts Council is crucial to that happening. we're doing all of this work to kind of diversify the way that artists get support, and that's going to be ongoing work. But right now, this is incredibly crucial, and you know, we've only just started dreaming the dreams of all of the things that we're going to be able to do with this increased budget for Illinois Arts Council, and we really don't want to see that go. It's also the 60th anniversary of Illinois Arts Council, so it would be a particularly crappy year for their funding to get cut again. Recent guidance from the governor's office is specifically asking state agencies to target and attempt to cut grant programs. And specifically any recent increases to grant programs that they've seen in the last couple of years. So for both of these reasons, IAC's budget is particularly in peril, and there's a really good chance that something might happen to it if we don't speak up. So please do make sure that you both sign that letter, and as Andrew said, send it to a couple of friends. It really takes like 60 seconds for you to both read through the context and add your name to the letter, so it's pretty easy to do. The other thing I'll mention one more time is the temp check survey that we've got out for arts organizations and businesses. If you are an individual artist who does not consider yourself a small business, or you're not part of an arts organization, but you do still want to fill out our temperature check survey, we've got a link specifically for individuals that are in that same link. So make sure you click on that link and take a few minutes to fill out the survey. It's incredibly helpful for us, and it also directly informs our advocacy efforts this year. Thanks again to Nora for expertly dropping all of the links in the chat. Thanks again. And hopefully we'll get a big old rush of last minute signs before Wednesday. Thanks again.
And with that, a couple just places to stay connected. Sign up for our newsletter if you aren't already on it. Some email addresses of the folks that are on this call. Finishing up at 4:26. I also want to just take a moment and shout out our friends and colleagues that are in LA. If you have friends and colleagues in LA, we are keeping them in our thoughts. And if there's anything that you can do to help them financially, we are all in this together. And we are sending a lot of love and dollar bills over to all of our colleagues over there. So thank you all. Have a lovely rest of your Monday. Have a lovely rest of your week. And we hope to be hearing from you soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.